So in the paragraph which we started this morning, I will read it again and then carry on with the comments on it. Since beginningless time, you have had, if you don't believe in rebirth, don't worry. I mean, of course, it's taken for granted that we are reborn again and again since beginningless time. If you don't believe that, and you believe there is only this lifetime, that's fine. Just act as if you did believe it. Because then, if it's true, you will be glad that you were very careful in this lifetime and very ethical and kind, because you will carry that on. And if at the end of this life, clink, that's the end, at least we led a meaningful life before we go. So it's a win-win situation, okay? So don't worry. Just be good. So, since beginningless time, you have had a continuous series of rebirths in this samsaric state. All beings, not only a limited number of them, have alternatively been your parents, that we dealt with this morning. Realize they have been kind to you as your present parents are now, but are now going the wrong way, confused and deluded, wanting happiness but engaging in activities that bring about the opposite. It's so sad. Our modern society exalts those very emotional poisons which the Buddha said was the root of our suffering, like our greed for more and more acquisitions and fame and status, and our aggression and anger and pride and so forth. All of these emotions which cause so much inner suffering are sold to us as if they were the route to happiness. No wonder people are in despair. No wonder. They get more and more and inwardly feel more and more empty. So this is the cause of compassion, that we are so deluded that we are creating so much suffering for ourselves and for others in the pursuit of happiness. Contemplate this with intense loving kindness and wish them happiness. May all beings be well and happy. With strong compassion, wish them freedom from suffering. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be well and happy, peaceful, at their peace, at their ease, and may they be free from suffering. With strong compassion, wish them freedom from suffering. Persistently generate the great undertaking of bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude, that includes the thought, I shall single-handedly establish them at the level of Buddhahood. As much as possible, try to eliminate self-cherishing and detrimental clinging to self-centered considerations. Through the highest intention of benefiting others, become accustomed to giving away what makes you happy and taking others' suffering upon yourself. If you cannot actually do it, just imagine it. Once you are familiar with this, learn to turn whatever you do into something beneficial for others. Now, many of you who are very familiar with the Buddhist path will recognize that is discussing the practice of Tonglen. Who knows Tonglen? Who doesn't know Tonglen? Okay. So very good, the majority do. Well done. So basically Tonglen is a practice which was promulgated in Tibet in the 11th century by a great Bengali master called Dipankara Atisha. And it is the essential point is a meditation. For example, make it practical. We are visiting someone who is very ill. They're lying there, they're very sick, and we feel very helpless. So this Tonglen practice is that with the ingoing breath, we visualize that we are taking in all their suffering and the causes of their suffering, not just physical, but also from a Buddhist point of view, karmic. And sort of like a vacuum cleaner, right? We are sucking up all that darkness in the form of dark light. It comes in through the nostrils, goes down into the heart. Now, at the heart, there is, we could visualize a little black pearl. That little black pearl in the center of our chest, in the heart chakra, represents our ego mind. The mind which says, I'm really sorry that you're suffering, but I'm glad it's not me. Right? That essential self-preservation mind. So this dark energy of their suffering, which we are inviting into ourselves, strikes at this little pearl in the center of our chest, our ego, self-cherishing mind. And because it is the opposite of what the ego would wish, therefore the ego immediately transforms. It is destroyed, because if we can have that much compassion, there is no ego. So immediately, as the dark light goes into this little pearl, it transforms into, like, say, a diamond or a white pearl, which is the very nature of our mind, the true nature of our mind, which is never polluted, never suffering. It's beyond all of that. In this text, we will deal with it later. What is the nature of the mind? But the nature of the mind is completely pure. And no matter how much we invoke darkness, it can never be sullied. It never, ever can be stained. So when we absorb the dark light into that pearl of self-cherishing mind, it immediately transforms into our true Buddha nature, which we all share. Not my Buddha nature versus your Buddha nature. Everybody has the same. It's therefore compared to space. But we'll deal with that later in the text. In the meantime, this dark pearl of self-cherishing mind transforms into our true nature, which is total compassion and wisdom. And so with the outgoing breath, we send out this clear white light, or golden light if you prefer. And then that goes into the person who is sick, and you imagine that every cell of their being, or their mind, everything is completely saturated in this golden light of well-being and happiness and wholesomeness. And so with the in-breath, the darkness; with the out-breath, the light. So Tong means to send, Len means to accept. And one can do this in many situations. We don't have to even have the people in front of us. We can just think of them, or if we have a photo. Or we could also, or if people are themselves sick, then they can use themselves in the sense that, for example, if I have, say, some form of cancer, then I can imagine that all the beings in the world who have this form of cancer, may all that come to me, and may my essential well-being go to them. So we will again be like their substitute. I would be so happy if I could suffer on behalf of all these other beings. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So in this way, it's a way of reversing our natural self-defensive state of mind, to opening the heart to tremendous compassion for all beings, and wishing them that from our endless whirlpool of well-being, that we may help them. And many people who have practiced this, like doctors and nurses come in and say, well, what's happened? The whole atmosphere has changed. It's a very powerful practice for helping us to overcome our egoistic clinging, and for benefiting the object of our... And we can use not just one person, but as we become more practiced, then we can think of many, many people. We can use this in many, many ways. But the idea is to bring in the dark energy and transform it into light energy. So, the highest intention, as much as possible, to try to eliminate self-cherishing and detrimental clinging to a self-centered consideration. So this is what it does. We are being counterintuitive as far as we want to preserve our own well-being. Here we are inviting the sufferings of others, gladly accepting them if they themselves could be free. So the Buddha always compared this kind of love and compassion, again, as I say, to a mother. Because a mother, if the child is sick, would gladly give up her own well-being if that child could recover its health. I mean, just naturally, she wouldn't have to try. It would be a natural response to want to give her well-being for the sake of her child. So the Buddha always said, just as a mother loves her child, her only child, there we must cherish all sentient beings. So through the highest intention of benefiting others, become accustomed to giving away what makes you happy and taking others' suffering upon yourself. So this is this Tonglen practice. If you cannot actually do it, then you imagine it, which is what we are doing with this visualization. Once you are familiar with this, learn to turn whatever you do into something beneficial for others. So throughout the day, we should keep that mind which is generating loving kindness and compassion for others and deep empathy for the suffering of others. Wishing, if you find someone who is suffering, just automatically imagine taking that suffering from them and in return giving them our well-being. It's, sort of an automatic response to the suffering. We see so much suffering around us. We read about so much suffering. So this is a very powerful meditation in this kind of country where every day you are reading accounts of suffering, of sentient beings, not of this group or that group, beings who are suffering. May they be well, may they be happy, may they be free from suffering. Also, now you're in retreat. You may have to deal with concrete, dangerous enemies, or with obstacles, hallucinations, and so on, created by spirits intent on disturbing you or causing trouble. No matter what happens, instead of creating much wrongdoing by getting angry, put on the superior armor of patience. Always expand your mind with love and compassion and try your best to be of help. The more you cling to thoughts of demons or enemies, the more numerous and intense the undesirable situations and harm caused by malevolent beings there will be. Knowing them all to be only manifestations of your mind's deluded conceptions, leave no more room for doubt about it, and thus tame your mind over and over again. Well, of course, Tibetans have a great belief in good and evil spirits. And so I will not push that one because I'm told most people here do not believe in good and evil spirits. But nonetheless, sometimes when we are in retreat, obstacles arise. They may be inner obstacles or outer obstacles. And so part of the success of a retreat, it depends on how we deal with obstacles. Various problems, I can't even remember what now. But anyway, I went to a Lama and was going on and on about all my obstacles. And he said, if you call them obstacles, they're obstacles. If you call them opportunities, they're opportunities. So he wasn't some kind of New Age guru. He was very, very traditional guy. But it's true. Everything which happens to us, we can take onto the path. And so therefore, sometimes when things seem the most difficult and the most negative, that is exactly the time when we will learn the most. So here he's dealing with people who create problems for us. Sometimes in retreat, we might have fellow retreatants who we have a problem with. Maybe they have psychological problems, or we don't like the way they smell or something. I mean, people are always complaining about, other people, not themselves, of course, but the others. Somebody, I remember, I haven't told this story for a time. Well, I don't know, in the Jewish, doesn't matter. Okay. Saint Therese of Lisieux was a modern French saint who entered a Carmelite nunnery when she was 15 years old. She died when she was 21, and she is the patron saint of France. Don't ask why. But she kept a diary. And one of the things she said was, you have to imagine, there were like 36 women in this nunnery. They never went out. They never met other people. Just 36. They didn't choose all their best friends to go into the convent, right? They went into the convent, then they discovered who they were going to spend the rest of their life with. Imagine it. Already you're too many. If we closed the doors and said you're never going to see anybody else again, right? You have to have just the first 2 rows. So there was one nun there. The chapel where they prayed was all stone, so it made an echo. And the nun sitting in front of her, who was going to be sitting in front of her for the rest of her life, because it wasn't just a weekend retreat course, made strange kind of clicking noises. And they weren't regular. And so you never know when she was going to make this strange click, which of course resounded in the silence. And there was Therese, supposed to be involved in internal prayer, and she was bathed in cold sweat, waiting for the next click. And so she realized that this woman, this nun, was not going to change. And so since she was not going to change, and this situation was not going to change, the only person to change would be Therese. So she started, instead of tensing up every time they sat, she began to cultivate love for this woman. She would embroider special little bookmarks and other things to offer to her. She would offer her when they met, instead of going around another corridor to avoid her, she would deliberately meet her and give her really her best smile from her heart, not just pretending, really trying to be as loving as possible. Until this nun said to Therese, well, I don't know why you love me so much. And Therese thought, if only you knew. But what happened was that actually it worked. Suddenly she didn't feel that this clicking, the clicking didn't stop, but it no longer bothered her, right? Now she had become very fond of this woman, and previously she hadn't liked the way she looked, the way she walked, the way she smelled, anything about her. Now suddenly she felt this warmth and tenderness towards this woman. So outwardly nothing had changed. But inwardly, everything had changed. So she was practicing patience. And so this is the point. When we are in situations which are difficult for us, instead of getting all upset and angry or full of self-pity, and if we get angry, then it just increases the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. Not only is there an external problem, but now there's an internal problem too. We have double the problem. So how, if we cannot solve the outer problem, we can solve the inner problem, which is our attitude. Our attitude to what happens to us, and especially to negative things which happen to us. People who are difficult, people who don't do what we want them to do. How to deal with that skillfully and take that very obstacle onto the path. We can do it, but it takes courage and strength. It's not a weakness. Patience, tolerance, forbearance is not a weakness, it's a strength. Getting angry and upset and wanting to hit back, that's weak. That's not strong. Anybody can do that. Little babies do that. Dogs do that. Anybody does that. Nothing special about that. But what is special is learning how to use that difficult situation to develop loving kindness, patience, compassion. That is extraordinary. And therefore it is called the armor of patience, because it protects us inwardly from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. If we have patience, it doesn't mean, of course, that if we are in an abusive situation, we just have to allow it to go on. We can also be, strong and deal with something which is not right. But we deal with it from the point of view of compassion, not from the point of view of anger. It can look like anger on the outside, but the inner motivation is not anger, not wishing to hurt, but wishing to transform the situation skillfully. And sometimes we have to look tough to do that. Chenrezig here is the bodhisattva of compassion. And he is shown, therefore, white, sitting on a lotus, smiling sweetly, everybody's idea of compassion. But the other side of Chenrezig is Mahakala, the great black one, who is the chief of all the protectors and is shown in a very fierce aspect. That is also compassion. Sometimes compassion has to be wrathful, but there's no anger there. It's been transmuted into wisdom and compassion. I mean, like a mother with a child. I mean, there are sometimes the mother has to be tough with the child and scold it. But it's not because she hates the child. It's because she knows the child needs to be disciplined, or maybe it will harm itself. So this is the point, that we can take everything which happens to us, everything which we experience, and transform it inside to help us on the path. Patience, tolerance, forbearance is one of the transcendent qualities needed for Buddhahood. It's not just meditation. We have many qualities which we need to cultivate from the heart. And one of them is patience. And we cannot learn how to be patient if nobody upsets us. Right? If we are all surrounded by lovely people who do exactly what we want them to do, it's all very nice, but what have we learned? It's easy to be nice to people who are nice. But when people are not nice, when people are difficult, when people are rude or aggressive, not retaliating with being rude and aggressive ourselves, but appreciating that they are helping us, they are putting a mirror to our own mind, and that this is a wonderful opportunity to be patient. This is something which is really very important. I mean, we have a lot of text to get through, so I don't have much time for stories. But one was, in India, we always regard as our object of patience the FRO, that means the Foreign Registration Office of the police. where we have to go for renewing our visas and so forth. And so one time I was lining up the FRO, and the police there, some of them are okay, some of them not so okay. But, you know, whenever I go in, I think, okay, this is the Lojong time. This is the time for mind training, right? And so in front of me was standing a Western monk. And he obviously must have been applying for his visa because, you know, 3 pages of forms to fill in. And so the officer who was dealing with him said, "This line is wrong, you did this wrong." So he said, "Oh, sorry, I'll correct it." "No." And he took the thing and he tore it in half and threw it back to the monk and said, "You can fill it all out again." So the monk said, "Oh, yes, thank you. Could you give me some new forms?" And so he handed him forms, and the monk said, "Thank you very much." And then he turned around and saw me, and then he grinned and he winked. Oh, yeah. That's it. He was happy. The officer was happy, and everybody was happy. If he had been angry and upset and da-da-da, then it would just have escalated, because he settled it right there. You know, that's the point. I mean, even in these very simple situations, you know, either we practice or we don't. Either we take adverse circumstances onto the path, or we don't. So this is why he's saying that once you are familiar with this, learn to turn whatever you do into something beneficial for others. So all the time during the day, as much as possible, we should try to be mindful, and we should try to have a kind heart to whoever we meet. To each one, as the Buddha said, to each one, their own self is most dear. In other words, we love ourselves most, even if we don't like ourselves. We still protect ourselves. And so recognizing that, we recognize that in everybody. Nobody wants to be hurt. Everybody would rather be happy. So even just by being polite, even by being smiling and saying hello, even that might actually change somebody's day. We don't know. Especially if everybody around them is grumpy, then somebody who smiles and says hello, shalom, then, oh, shalom, yeah. And maybe that changes everything. We have much more influence on people than we think we do. And so we should try to have a beneficial influence, not make people's days more heavy, more difficult. Even just a smile can change everything. So we should remember that. And during the day, as much as possible, every single being that we meet, our first thought should be, may you be well and happy. We don't have to say anything, but we can think it. So you might have to deal with all sorts of obstacles and problems, and if we say it's an obstacle, it's an obstacle. If we say it's a learning process, then it's a learning process. It depends on our own attitude, not the external circumstances. So don't get angry, but be patient and understanding. Expand your mind with love and compassion and try your best to help. The more you cling to thoughts of demons or enemies, you know, demons means anything antagonistic to me, the more numerous and intense the undesirable situations and harm caused by difficult beings there will be. Knowing them all to be only manifestation. After all, even somebody who is an enemy has people who love them. I mean, even if they only have a dog that they love, somebody loves them. And so we might see them as the enemy, but other people see them as their dearest beloved. Who are we? It's only our mind which thinks enemy or friend. If we see that all sentient beings inherently have the possibility for goodness and they all want happiness, then where's the division? We're all just human beings inhabiting this planet. None of us actually are more special or less special than anyone else. We all deserve love. We all deserve compassion. So leave no more room for doubt about this. Tame your mind over and over again. Whenever thoughts of pride or arrogance or aggression or wishing somebody, rejoicing when you hear something has happened to people that you don't care for. Something bad has happened, you're happy for that. That's terrible. That is really the pits. When we hear that bad things have happened to people that we don't care for, we should feel great compassion for them and their suffering and not rejoice in others' misfortune, ever. Instead of censuring people, making them unhappy by abusing or blaming them with harmful intention, regardless of their high or low status, let yourself be flooded with affection and loving kindness. On seeing faults in others, do not criticize. Instead, look at your own faults and recognize them. Try your best to discipline this unruly mentality, this unruly mind, our bad dispositions and habits. We need to look inside ourselves to see our normal responses, and where they are positive, to encourage them. Where they are not positive, then we have to change them. We cannot change the world if we cannot even change ourselves. I mean, we go around talking about all these high-sounding principles, but if our own mind is filled with negativity and division and discrimination, how can we talk? It's just talk. So each one of us is responsible for our own mind, heart. No one else can do it for us. Even the greatest teacher in the world cannot change our hearts. Only we can do that. They can advise what we should do, but they cannot do it for us. So you have wonderful opportunities here. Really, really, you are very privileged, because exactly these things are facing you, and how to deal with these problems in your country skillfully, to bring benefit as much as possible to everyone without discrimination. This is a wonderful opportunity, because otherwise people will hear about it, see things on television, but they're not living it. You're living it. And at the same time, you're highly educated, you're highly sophisticated in your lifestyle, you are able to think things through and really evaluate what is truth, what is not truth, how much we are conditioned by our upbringing. You are very fortunate. So don't waste this opportunity. Really look at what is the true situation. And don't make excuses. Which doesn't mean, again, being hard on ourselves, bashing ourselves over the head. The Buddha said, first we start with loving kindness, compassion to ourselves. But nonetheless, during the day, we practice the kind heart. As the Dalai Lama said, at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is cultivate the good heart. That has nothing to do with religion. That has nothing to do with beliefs. That has just to do with our human potential for goodness. If we cannot even cultivate a good heart, then what? Isn't it? It's quite simple. I mean, all these people here, you have lots of people to practice on. Some people are nice and friendly, some people are not nice, some people are even rude and aggressive. They're all sentient beings wanting happiness and wishing to avoid suffering. So we wish everybody, may you be well, may you be happy. It's simple. Really, it's not difficult. The only problem is we don't do. Don't blame others. We're very good at blaming all the problems on someone else over there. It's not their problem, it's our problem. And this is good news, because we cannot change outer circumstances so much. We can change our inner attitude. And our inner attitude radiates out to change the world. Change your mind, change the world. Yeah. If we don't change our mind, the world is not going to change. Because the world is a projection of the beings who inhabit the world, and especially the human beings. We have the world we deserve. We have created this world. So don't blame other people. So tame your mind over and over again. So don't criticize, don't look for the faults in others. Look at your own faults, recognize them, and try to discipline this unruly mind. And all our bad dispositions, all our habits of thinking and reacting, which cause grief for ourselves, grief for others, change it. Stop blaming everybody else. We can change. But it's nicer to think it's other people. They should change. Then everything would be okay. It's not like that. Shantideva gives an example. He says that if we are walking on the earth barefoot, then the earth is filled with stones and sharp pebbles and thistles. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to carpet the whole earth in leather so that it's nice for me to walk on? That's not possible. So he says, but if we put leather on the soles of our feet in the form of shoes or sandals, then we can walk anywhere. And this is very true. We are always thinking to change outer circumstances, but first we have to change our own minds, our own heart, our own disposition. And from that, then, everything can change. Even just a group of people who have good heart and good motivation and are in harmony can effect enormous changes. There may be certain small and virtuous actions you still cannot perform. When you see them being performed by others, such as your guru or your Dharma brothers or other practitioners, lay devotees, whoever, regardless of their position, do not become competitive or envious. We rejoice in their deeds and do your best by various means to accumulate a great amount of immaculate, wholesome actions. So when we see people doing good things, when we see people doing bad things, we should not censor them. We should look at our own mind. When we see people doing good things, then we should rejoice. We should be so happy to see people doing, when we hear even of people who are doing beautiful things, good things, whether small or big, whatever, any virtuous action that we hear about or see, we should rejoice. We should think, how wonderful. That's very important also. We not only look at all the faults, we look at all the goodness. Very important to recognize goodness. Because, as you know, the media is mostly zeroed in on everything which is wrong. And the more wrong it is, the more publicity it gets. But at the same time, there is so much goodness going on, which is not publicized, which is not front page news. But there's so much of it. Most people in their hearts are good. Well, everybody in their very hearts are good. But even in their superficial hearts are still, would rather do good than to do evil, even anywhere. Because if we do good, it makes us feel better. So therefore, if you see anybody even doing a very small act of, kindness, or even the big things of kindness, whatever, we should just feel how wonderful, and not feel jealous of them or envious of their attainment. Oh, that should have been me. That's very mean-spirited. When we see goodness, we rejoice. So then sometimes we are thinking, such a lowly person as I cannot help others. You become frustrated and disheartened. Put aside these feelings and take on yourself the sufferings of all beings. No matter what unwanted events you encounter, such as sickness, misfortune, feel joyful, as past karma is exhausted. In addition, imagine that you take upon yourself all the pain and wrongdoings and obscurations of all beings. When this actually does happen, take any adversity on the path to enlightenment by means of such joyous determination. In other words, whatever happens to us, we shouldn't be downhearted. We shouldn't get dispirited. Even if we are very sick or we come across so many obstacles, nonetheless, we should have that inner strength that thinks, in a Buddhist context, we think if something bad happens, like we get sick or many obstacles come, that is clearing up bad past karma. And so in that way, it's a purification. But in any case, whatever it is, whether you believe that or don't, the important thing is that whatever happens to us, we should take it as an opportunity to practice being okay about it, not getting disheartened or self-pitying, but really thinking, how can I use this situation to be of benefit to myself and of benefit to others? So if we feel like that, if we recognize that the important thing is not what happens to us, but how we respond to what happens to us, whether we respond skillfully or unskillfully, then there is no fear. Our problem is that we are caught up in hopes and fears, hoping that everything will go how I want it to go, and fearful that it will not. But if we have the courage to recognize that everything which happens to us is a teaching for us, is something which we need to learn and to transform within ourselves, then we are not so caught up in, anxieties and hopes. Of course we are human beings, and of course when something tragic happens, we are sad. I'm not pretending. But nonetheless, once that happens, we grasp at it and we cling to it like it's our identity to suffer, then it's a problem. If when something difficult happens, we understand and we feel sad, but then we don't cling to that and we try to make use of it, then we can go on. But if we grasp, people tend to grasp at suffering much more than happiness. We are very perverse. And so this suffering ego, the suffering ego is actually a happy ego. Because the ego is perfectly happy to be miserable. If we are miserable, me, isn't it? When we are truly happy inside, we're not thinking about ourselves so much, we are thinking about other beings. But when we are very sad, when we are feel very misused by life and depressed, it's all me, me, me. I don't care about other people's suffering, it's me. What about my suffering? That's what the ego is. It inflates and inflates and inflates. We should be aware of that. Really, really. This is why human beings are happy to be miserable. Because it's all about me. And my suffering, my family, my this, my that. Instead of opening the heart to recognize, look, I am suffering like this. How many beings in the world are likewise suffering like this? May they be well and happy. I really understand how they feel because I also have experienced this. So I will open my heart to embrace all these beings who are suffering as I am suffering. Then we are making use of our suffering. But if we just turn it in on ourselves, then we continue suffering, and at the end of the day, nothing is accomplished. We are just angry, miserable beings, blaming everybody else for our own problems. So this is very important. This is also part of the Tonglen, that when suffering comes to us, we open the heart instead of closing it, thinking that we're something unique and special because I'm suffering. Actually, in the whole world, there's so much suffering. We can identify with that. And also when we are in a situation where we are really encountering so much suffering coming in on us, and even if we have tremendous compassion for that, as many people do, we also have to learn how to let it go, how to evaporate it, how not to cling to it like a heavy stone inside us. Many people in the helping professions burn out because they bring in so much suffering every day and it just sits there inside them. They don't know how to deal with it. And this is why in Buddhism it is said the nature of the mind is both compassion and wisdom. Like the two wings of a bird. If we only have compassion and no wisdom, then we are overwhelmed by the sufferings of others. If we only have wisdom but no compassion, then it's cold and distant. We need both. The wisdom sees. Well, it's difficult to express, but it allows us to recognize that these events are not as solid and real as we take them to be. So in Buddhist parlance, this is called emptiness. Emptiness just means we give space. We give openness. So these things come in, but they don't stay there. They are able to allow them to also expand outwards. I mean, I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a very good example of what we mean here, because every day people come to him from all around the world with their problems, because they know he's in exile and he's very compassionate. So people from all over the world who have problems, they come to him. And when he hears them, his heart completely opens and he's, just crying away. And they're crying, he's crying, everybody's crying. He feels it so much in his heart. He knows what they're suffering. But then 5 minutes later, somehow he cracks some joke and everybody's laughing. And the whole dark atmosphere has just opened up and lightened up. And when they leave, they're smiling. And they feel like they've put down their burden and he's allowed it to dissolve. That's his wisdom aspect. He doesn't end up heavily burdened with all the sufferings of the world. He feels it tremendously as his own suffering, but he can let it go. That's why he keeps going. That's why when people think of His Holiness, they think of his laugh. They don't think of him, being all upset and crying. And so this is why meditation also helps us enormously, because it helps us to see our thoughts and our feelings are not as solid and real as we take them to be. We experience that. We experience the open, spacious emptiness of our thoughts and our feelings. Then our compassion arises naturally, but it's not something heavy. It's healing. This is why it's important to practice and to look at the mind. Not just be kind, but we have to understand. Deep understanding is also necessary. So we can think, oh, such a lowly person as I cannot help others. But we mustn't think like that, because all of us have Buddha nature. Buddha nature means that our essential nature is completely perfect. It's completely pure. We embody love and compassion. Our essential nature is empty, but at the same time radiantly spacious and clear. This is who we really are, underneath all this, thick clouds of all our conceptual thinking and emotions. Underneath that is the clear sky. He's going to talk about this later. But because of that, we all have the potential to awaken. If we had to get it from somewhere else, then we might think, oh, it's impossible, I can't do it. But it's already there. The example is of a beggar who thinks he's very poor, and so every day goes out to, just get a few shekels. But all the time in his lowly hut underneath, there's this huge treasure. He's really a millionaire, but he isn't looking in the right place. He thinks that his means are going to come from someone else. He doesn't recognize all the time that he's extremely wealthy. And so that's like us. We think that our happiness, unhappiness depends on others. We don't recognize our own wealth, our inner wealth, because we're looking in the wrong place. So this is what, again, meditation is about. It's about looking in the right place for our inconceivable wealth, which we all possess. So there's no point in thinking, I can't do it. I'm too stupid, I'm too lowly, I've never accomplished anything, me, who can do it? Anybody can do it, if we persevere and are patient and, keep going. So, never let your mind wander. Ha ha ha. You're in retreat here. You're in retreat, right? Never let your mind wander or be without concern for your practice. Always rest naturally in the conviction that the essence of this self-arising mind has been empty from the very beginning. Do not grasp at the natural expressions of the mind, the experiences of bliss, of clarity, the union of these two, but relax at ease. Avoid acceptance and rejection, such as manipulating your meditation by thinking, this is a meditation, I am doing this is what it needs. So now he's jumped immediately into the sitting meditation of Mahamudra. The essential point of the meditation is to leave the mind in its natural state and to be very relaxed. It's not the kind of meditation where you tense up and strive and put forth a lot of effort. It is about making the mind very open and spacious and aware. So he is not giving instructions here on Mahamudra. He assumes you will receive those from your own teacher. But the point with the Mahamudra is that the mind stays relaxed. We're not trying to do anything. We're not trying to get anything. We are allowing the mind just to be as it is and be aware of what is going on. So normally in Mahamudra meditations, they start with the practice of shamatha. Shamatha is usually translated as calm abiding or tranquility meditation. It means getting the mind one-pointed, focused attention, and at the same time, this calming the mind. As our attention span gets stronger, then our discursive monkey mind naturally begins to calm down. This is true in all Buddhist schools. You start by learning how to pay attention, not allowing the mind to wander in all directions, and at the same time, as our attention span or our mindfulness becomes stronger, then simultaneously the distracted mind becomes quieter. This is, as I say, a basic principle in all Buddhist meditation schools, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, whatever. The first thing we have to do is tame the monkey mind. And we tame the monkey mind by learning to develop an awareness of what is happening. And the easiest way for most people to develop that attention is through focusing on the breath. This is because we're all breathing. Normally, when we breathe, we are not conscious that we are breathing. Now we are going to give our attention to the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. This is not pranayama. It's not a breathing exercise. We just breathe normally and just are aware of the breath as it goes in. We breathe and we know. That's all. And so if what happens normally, I mean, this sounds very easy, but any of you who have meditated know that it all sounds very simple, right? I breathe, and then I know I'm breathing, and then breath 1, breath 2, breath 3. I wonder why they served that for lunch. It was really quite strange. And off we go. You know, and then after a few minutes, whoops, breath, right, back to the breath. And then a few breaths, and oh God, it's so boring. Okay, and off we go. In the past, in the future, anywhere except now. The point with the breath is that we cannot breathe in the past or in the future. We only breathe now. So it's a very skillful way to bring our mind into the present moment. If we are not thinking, oh, now I'm breathing, right, which is again a discursive mind, making comments. But if we give our full attention just to the breath as it goes out and comes in, then in that moment we are present. And when the mind wanders off, we bring it back. No recriminations, we just bring it back. Oops, mind wandering, bring it back. Goes off again, bring it back. Goes off again, bring it back. Some people find it useful to therefore count the breath. So we breathe in, and then on the out breath, 1. Breathe in, on the out breath, 2. Up to 5 or 10, and then start again. If in the meantime we break it, we have minds wandering off again, start back at number 1, not as a punishment, but as a way for us to see as our attention span begins to get stronger. Oh, before I could only get up as far as 3, now I've managed 5, and then eventually, it begins to get easier. The point is to relax. We're not in competition. We are just trying to breathe and know we're breathing. So that is the first stage. To be able to settle the mind. And then when we are able to give genuine attention, and it stays there for a little while, maybe a few minutes, so that our sense of what we're trying to do is not just calm the discursive mind. What we're really trying to do is to develop the ability to be aware. Normally, when we think, we are carried away by our thoughts. We are the thoughts. We get swept along by our feelings and emotion and our mental chatter like a river. We're just completely submerged and swept along. So what we are trying to do now is develop the ability to observe. The ability to be conscious of what's going on instead of swept along by what's going on. This is very important. In Buddhist parlance, again, it's usually called mindfulness. Now mindfulness has become a big catchword. But it is this ability to be aware in the present moment, what's happening. So after we become fairly confident of staying without wandering too much, we have a sense of being able to observe. The observer becomes stronger. Our mindfulness becomes stronger. Then we turn that searchlight away from the breath onto the thoughts themselves. And then it's like sitting on the banks of the river, watching the river going by. We're not blocking the river, we're not damming the river. The river is not the problem. The problem is our inability to observe it. So, and our identification with our thoughts and our feelings. That is who I am. We believe our thoughts, and this is a really big problem. So here we are learning how to set back and just watch the thoughts flowing by without jumping in and getting carried away by them. Or you could think of it like a movie screen. You know, we are watching the movie, but we are at the same time not acting in the movie. We are just observing it and knowing we're observing it. It's just a movie. Might be an interesting movie or a boring movie. I mean, the mind can be very interesting. The mind can be extraordinarily boring. It's usually very repetitious. But whatever is going on in the mind, the contents are not important. The important thing is knowing what is going on. Just watching them go by and recognizing they're just thoughts. They're not me, they're not mine. They're thoughts. This is an enormous step forward. If we can accomplish that much, we have accomplished a lot. It's by no means the end, but it's a very, very good start. And everything else basically rests on our ability to know the mind without always just plunging back into the stream and getting carried away again. So this is why he's saying, never let your mind wander. So what he's saying is, again, that people, they get into meditation and they get a bit bored and then the mind wanders off and it's, oh, fascinating. God, I hadn't thought of that before. And then off we go. And then, half an hour later, whoops, there goes the bell. And where was our mind? So whenever we recognize that the mind is wandering, as soon as we recognize that, we have to be very strict with ourselves. However fascinating our memories or our fantasies or ideas may be, drop it. And go back to just observing the mind without judging it, altering it in any way, being concerned with what is in the contents of the mind. This is during practice, strict practice. During strict practice, we do not judge the mind. If we have beautiful thoughts or really stupid, ridiculous thoughts, angelic thoughts, evil, demonic thoughts, they are just thoughts. They are not me, they are not mine. Let them flow and observe. And don't be concerned with, during practice, don't be concerned with whether the thoughts are nice thoughts or stupid thoughts or what kind of thoughts. It doesn't matter, they're just thoughts. It's very important. During the day, we can be more discriminating. If we see negative thoughts, we recognize them and try to change them into positive thinking. But during formal practice, we don't make any discrimination. We just see thoughts as thoughts, emotions as emotions. Not me, not mine. Empty. Why do we solidify our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas? Make them so hard and intractable. And because I think it, I believe it, it's true. Obviously, if I believe it, it must be true. He might believe the opposite, but that's because he's stupid. He should believe what I believe, because I know. So like this, we can see the world is in a horrible mess because we believe our own thoughts. But our thoughts are changing all the time. They're just impulses of energy. Some thoughts are very good thoughts, helpful. Some thoughts are really not helpful. A lot of it is due to our own conditioning. People born in a Jewish society grow up Jewish. People born in a Buddhist society grow up Buddhist. We might have very different ideas, but it's because we have been conditioned. And some of those ideas are good ones if we examine them, and valid. And some of them maybe are not so good and create lots of problems. For everybody, the whole world over. So we shouldn't always believe what we think. We should recognize that thoughts really are just empty bubbles. They might be very colorful, very brilliant, but if you go plink, they're empty. They're not real. They're just a thought, just an impulse. So much problems in this world are created through believing our thinking, not examining it properly with wisdom. So never let your mind wander. That means as soon as we see the mind is wandering off, bring it back. We have to be a little strict with our mind, right? Now mind, behave yourself. So therefore, sometimes for some people to have a short session is more helpful. A short session and then relax, and then another session, then relax, and another session. Keep them short. Some people find that it takes them time to settle down, and therefore a longer session works better for them. So I think it's important for us all to decide what works best for us. And even if we are sitting and not moving, we can, again, the example is of tightening and then loosening, and then tightening and then loosening. You know, in the Mahamudra, it comes this idea that sometimes we have to say, okay, now I'm not going to think any thought except what I'm doing, right? And for a short time, and then just relax. And then again, tighten up, and then relax. So sometimes that's very helpful for people also, especially if the mind is becoming very wandering a lot and becoming chaotic, you know, to say, now look here, mind, you get yourself together. We're going to practice properly. We're not wasting time. So for a short time, you know, tight and then relaxed again. Tight, relaxed. If that works, then that's good. I mean, there are many approaches. We have to find what works best for us. But the important thing is to develop the ability to be aware. Then whatever happens, if we know it, no problem. If we don't know it because we have lost our awareness and we are distracted, then we have to bring our awareness back again. So, never let your mind wander and be without concern for your practice. Am I doing it right? What did it say? What did she say now? What was I supposed to be doing? Is this right? Is this really awareness or not awareness? Am I wandering? No, I'm not wandering. I'm just chattering to myself, but that's not wandering. I'm thinking about meditation. And so forth. Let it go. Okay, don't be concerned. Are we doing it right? Are we not doing it right? Just do it. Just whatever is happening, really try to know it. Not judging it. Just knowing. This is what's happening in the mind at this moment. Rest naturally in the conviction that the essence of the self-arising mind has been empty from the very beginning. So the mind, our ordinary conceptual thinking mind, is endlessly expressing itself. But it's empty. It's not real. It's not solid. It's not enduring. Very important, really, to understand that this is just it rises, but it's, you know, I mean, again, one can think of like a movie. If you think of a movie, then, you know, you have all these little separate transparent squares with the light from behind shining through onto a screen. But because those little frames, those transparent frames, are moving so fast, it looks like we have projected reality outside of ourselves. So one aim of this kind of meditation is that as our awareness becomes stronger, our ability to observe the mind becomes stronger, the frames begin to get slower and slower and slower. The mind begins to quieten down. And then it can happen that the previous thought, between the previous thought and the next thought, like between two frames, there's a gap. And if we have pure awareness, we see through the gap to the nature of the mind. So even in shamatha, which is the first, it can already give us an idea of the empty, spacious, luminous quality of our pure awareness. So this is not just a beginner's practice. So rest naturally in the conviction that the essence of the self-arising mind, our mind just keeps going, we don't have to make it come. We don't have to, manufacture thoughts. Thoughts are always coming. But they are not solid. They are empty. They are not real. They're just pulsations of energy running through the mind. So we don't have to grasp at them. We don't have to cling to them. We can observe them. Sit back and observe the river going past. Sit back and watch the movie. But we know it's a movie. I mean, in the movie, if the heroine dies in the last act, we are, but we don't go out and commit suicide. We know it's just a movie. Who is it was saying? Aileen was saying that she one Lama we know, a wonderful Lama who is the abbot of a wonderful yogini nunnery in Tibet. And he was very, he'd always been in eastern Tibet. He was very naive. And he went to Lhasa. And somebody took him to the cinema. And he'd never been to a cinema before. So he was terribly impressed. And he was explaining to his friend the next day about this film which he had seen and how wonderful it was. And his friend said, "Oh, that sounds really good. I shall go and see it." And he said, No, you can't. He died in the end. So we be like that. We believe everything, And it's just a projection. So, always rest naturally in the conviction that the essence of the self-arising mind has been empty from the very beginning. Do not grasp at the natural expressions of the mind, or the experiences of bliss and clarity, or the union of the true. Sometimes when we are sitting and meditating, great sense of great joy and bliss arise from inside, or suddenly everything becomes very clear and vivid. And it's very easy to grasp at these kind of very pleasant experiences and want to repeat them. If we have suddenly very beautiful experiences, great bliss arising, naturally we would like to think that that is a sign of great progress, and next session I want great bliss. And so that grasping is a big obstacle, again. If horrific experiences come, or if blissful experiences come, they're just experiences, they're just a movie. You can have vampire movies or romances, but it's all just a movie. We don't have to believe it. So it's very important, especially when very pleasant experiences arise in our practice, not to grasp at them. There was one very famous meditation teacher in America, and he used to be a monk under this wonderful Theravadian forest meditation teacher called Ajahn Chah. And so this monk, this American monk, he went to... Ajahn Chah was mostly about sweeping and everyday life, nothing special. And so this monk goes to Burma, where he's doing very rigorous meditations, and he has all these experiences of bliss and light and extraordinary experiences. And he comes back to Ajahn Chah, and he tells him all these fantastic experiences and visions and all these wonderful things which happened to him in Burma, which never happened in Thailand. And Ajahn Chah is saying, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful. More things to let go of." He was so wise, Ajahn Chah. And that's the point, because, whatever we cling to, it's clinging. And we are trying to go beyond grasping, right? So he says here, therefore, that do not grasp at these natural expressions of the mind, bliss, clarity, union of the two, but relax at ease. Whatever comes up, just relax and observe. Avoid acceptance and rejection, such as manipulating your meditation by thinking, this is meditation, I'm doing this is what I need. In other words, don't start analyzing the meditation while we're meditating. And rejection and acceptance means that we like the good feelings and we are rejecting any negative feelings that come up. I mean, if we consider it, like, to change the metaphor, if we consider it like an ocean, then mostly we are on the surface of the ocean. We are with the waves and the undercurrents. The waves go up, the waves go down, and we're swept along with them. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. And now we are calming the surface waves. And so then our consciousness begins to go down through the surface, down deeper into the ocean. Now, what are we going to meet in the ocean? We might meet friendly dolphins, beautiful golden fish. There's some very beautiful fish there, friendly, nice. Or we might meet sharks or jellyfish, monsters of the deep. We don't know what we're going to meet down there. The ocean is very deep. So, we must not evaluate. Whatever comes up, we observe it, accept it. Whether it is fear or very traumatic memories or a lot of anger. Some people experience great rage. There they are sitting quietly and they're as we begin to release the inner energies in our subconscious. So we don't know what's going to come up. Some people have great bliss, some people have great anger, or great fear. But whatever it is, we should observe it and accept it, but don't cling. I mean, this is a whole other level. But the important thing is that whatever happens in our mind, it cannot hurt us. We are safe. We shouldn't fear, even fear itself. So in the meantime, don't be self-conscious. Am I meditating right? Is this the right way? Is that not the right way? Just relax. Just relax and observe. Do not be absorbed by a continuous state of delusion in which you are not recognizing the undercurrent of subtle wandering thoughts. Whatever thoughts of subject and object arise, recognize them. Simply recognize them. Without grasping, relax in that state of awareness. Other than this, forget about the fabricated process of struggling with remedies to eliminate the undesirable, which is suppressing something and pursuing something else. So here we are just relaxing. We are not trying to change anything or alter anything or supplant one kind of thought by something else. We are just allowing things to be how they are. In an open, spacious mind. In a spacious, open mind like the sky, black clouds, thunder, lightning, white fluffy clouds, rainbows. The sky can accommodate everything. It's not discriminating. Whatever arises and then eventually fades again. So it's important to, when we are watching the mind, to also see the subtle underlying subject-object dichotomy in the mind. Because, sometimes the surface thoughts begin to calm down, but still there are other underlying tensions and feelings there. So more and more as our awareness becomes clear, we begin to see what is happening here in the ocean of the mind. Not just the surface waves, but also the undercurrents. Slowly, 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 we are trying to understand our mind, the levels of the mind. Normally, we just exist on the very, very surface, and that's what we identify with. But once we start looking at our mind, we can recognize we cannot be the surface mind, because that's changing moment to moment to moment. Our thoughts are racing by. So how can we be our thoughts? They might be repetitious sometimes. We have pretty boring thoughts, like reruns of some soap opera. But nonetheless, because the mind is changing moment to moment to moment, we cannot identify with something which is so full of change. And then, who is observing that? Because that's the next question. If we can observe the mind, then we are not that consciousness which observes. I mean, there is a separation. So that is the next question to start asking ourselves. We're looking for reality. We're looking to find the fundamental nature of the mind. And so the first thing we come across is our tumultuous, gross thinking at the top. And then we are cultivating the ability to observe, to be aware, which is a more subtle level of consciousness. But that subtle level of consciousness is still dualistic. There is an observer and the observed, right? There is subject and object. This is what he's talking about. So, whatever thoughts of subject and object arise, simply recognize them without grasping, relax in that state of awareness. So what we are doing now, we are developing the ability to be mindful. So we start with something simple, like the breath. That helps us to develop this ability to observe. Then, when that is fairly stable and we can really experience that we are really focused on the rise and fall of the breath, and it's more or less constant now, not too many breaks, then we take that ability to observe, to be mindful, and turn it back on the thoughts themselves. So then we recognize that these thoughts are just flowing endlessly, chatter, 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 chatter. They cannot be me and mine, because the moment they arise, they've disappeared again. But there is the observer. So there's the subject and the object. Right. So then the next stage is to drop the object and just be aware of being aware. Right? It's like the traditional example is of an eagle flying. You know, if you see a big bird like a falcon or an eagle, and they're flying, almost no effort. Not like little birds, pigeons and things. Yeah. But that eagle is not asleep. That eagle is totally focused. It's said to look can see objects on the ground between 6 and 10 miles. Eagle-eyed, right? Totally aware of what's going on down there. its lunch is coming up. So like that, totally awake and aware, but at the same time totally effortless. Right? Got it? Usually at the beginning, because if this happens, then we think, oh look, now I've got it. Then you've not got it, right? So in the beginning, often this sense of being open and spacious, with just aware of being conscious of being conscious. Usually we're conscious of something. Now we're conscious of consciousness. We just know, without knowing any one thing. There's that quality of knowing. So that, usually, it takes time to really be able to rest in that for any long periods of time. But it's a bridge to an even deeper level of the mind. So, whatever thoughts of subject and object arise, simply recognize them. Without grasping, relax in that state of awareness. Other than this, forget about the fabricated process of struggling with remedies to eliminate the undesirable, which is suppressing something and pursuing something else. At this time, we just have to be aware. There's no worries about good thoughts, bad thoughts, transforming thinking, or applying an antidote, or any of that. There's just this open, spacious awareness, which we don't have to do anything to, because if we do, then we've already lost it. It's just there. Okay, so that is like a bridge back to the essential nature of the mind. The essential nature of the mind, which we all possess, is compared to space or the sky, because it has no center, it has no boundaries. It's not my nature compared with your nature. Space is indivisible. For example, if one said to you, well, in this theater, what was there? Then you will say, well, there was a platform and a table, and there were chairs, and there were people, and there were lights. But really, there is space. If there was no space, none of these other things could exist. We only can be here because there is a space to be here. And at the same time, even these solid objects are space on an ultimate level. So where is space not? I mean, you are here, you come to this theater today and you find your seats, and then you go out and then you come back in, and then someone is sitting in my seat. That's my seat you're sitting in there. And people really come to fisticuffs over that. But we are all breathing in and out the same air. I cannot say, excuse me, this is my air, you can't breathe my air. Even deadly enemies facing each other are breathing in and interchanging at a very intimate level, because we're breathing in, taking down into our lungs, taking out. So this is a good example for the nature of the mind, in that it's indivisible and it's not owned by anybody. At the same time, the nature of the mind is not just space. And the other good thing about space, as an example, is that you can't grasp it, you can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it. And yet, it's all around us, everywhere, right? But we can't grasp it. But the mind is not just space. It is also knowing. It is aware. Space is not aware. But the mind is aware. The very nature of the mind is this open, empty spaciousness and knowing. So that knowing, at the fundamental level of the mind, is non-dual. In other words, there's no subject and object. All the other levels of our consciousness, including mindfulness, have a subject who is mindful and an object. But at the very nature of the mind, which is like this open, spacious clarity and awareness, there is no sense of separation, I, versus everybody else, non-I. This is why I'm saying that at a very deep level we are all very intimately interconnected with all beings, not just human beings. Animals, insects, probably also plants and trees. All of us, we are very intimately connected, but we don't see it because of our dualistic thinking. So meditation is to introduce us to the nature of the mind. And having been introduced to the nature of the mind, to then cultivate that until we are always in that state of non-dual awareness, which in Dzogchen terms is called Rikpa. In Mahamudra terms, it's called Tamaji Shepa, which means ordinary mind. So the nature of the mind in Mahamudra is called the ordinary mind. But it's not what we think of as ordinary mind. It's ordinary because it doesn't have, it's not decorated and fancy and, all frilled out. It's very, very plain. In that way, it's very ordinary. It's not light and visions and bliss and all these things. It's very, very ordinary, like space. Can't grasp it, we can't see it, we can't taste it, touch it, but it's the foundation of our being. And in that level of awareness, we know. And it is the very foundation of genuine compassion and genuine wisdom. So all meditation, genuine meditation, is to get us back to our fundamental nature, our pure primordial awareness, which is never contaminated, no matter what we do. It's always just there. It's there. We just don't see it because we're too busy talking. So Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and most practices are really, the Mahamudra practice is to relax the mind at ever deeper and deeper levels so that the nature of the mind reveals itself. You can't do it by effort, because who is making the effort? I am making the effort. But it's the I which is the problem. And all genuine spiritual traditions, not just Buddhist, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, any Sufis, they all recognize that our true nature is obscured by what they call the small self. This sense of I is obscuring our innate divinity in theistic terms. They all know that. And so all their practices of the mystics in all the traditions is about how to overcome the small I so that we can open up into something so much vaster that normally is covered up and we don't recognize. So this is the Buddhist approach. The Buddhist approach is through meditation on the mind and recognizing, letting go of layer after layer of inattention until the mind is open, spacious, and completely aware, completely awake. This state is not a state of blanking out. It's a state of waking up. It is compared to when we are in a dream state. We believe our dreams. We think what we're dreaming is real. If it's something frightening, our heart beats. If it's something pleasant, then we feel joy, and so forth. You know, while we're asleep, we believe our dreams. The moment we wake up, we recognize, oh, that was just a dream. And we think now we're awake. But to those who are genuinely awake, who are genuinely enlightened, they say, this is still just a dream. And so our ordinary conceptual thinking mind is compared to a dream, an illusion, a mirage. You could say a movie. We think it's real. But it's still just an illusion. And so the purpose of meditation is to wake up. Buddha means to awake. To wake up and stay awake. 24 hours a day. So that's the path. He is expecting that you're going to get instruction from your teachers, so he's not going into explaining the different stages on the path very clearly. He assumes you know what you're going to do when you get there. But anyway, without grasping, relax in that state of awareness. Other than this, forget about fabricated process of struggling with remedies to eliminate the undesirable, which is suppressing something and pursuing something else. Once you have recognized the stark, clear awareness that transcends the dualistic mind and is absolutely uninfluenced by thoughts of the three times, we're not thinking of the past or the future or even the present, we are just aware of what is happening without grasping. Keep it always present through mindfulness with or without effort. So in the beginning, of course, we need to make efforts to be mindful because our mind is accustomed to wandering all over the place and being distracted. And so in the beginning, we have to put forth some effort to try to remind ourselves to be mindful and disciplined. Eventually, it becomes second nature. And then we don't have to make any more effort. We just naturally are in a state of mindfulness. When you meet the very great practitioners, you see very clearly they are completely present, and yet, you know, they're obviously not making any particular effort to be present. They just are. And so everything that they do seems, even just picking up a cup of coffee or tea, seems meaningful just because they are in that state of complete open, spacious awareness at all times. But it doesn't make them kind of zombie-like, you know. I mean, it sounds like... It's not like that, you know. I mean, these lamas are very energetic. They're running around all over the place. I mean, the Buddha himself spent, after his enlightenment, he spent 45 years wandering around Northeast India, you know, talking to everybody and organizing his community and so forth. He was very active. He didn't just sit under a tree the rest of his life. So, you know, also with these great practitioners where their lamas are just ordinary people, you know, they look like ordinary, but you know they're not ordinary. You feel it. You know, there's something about them which is not ordinary. But one cannot always put one's finger on it because, you know, they're not carrying a little sweatshirt saying, I am enlightened. So we start where we are. And the first thing is to really take seriously the ability to be aware. Everything which we receive, all the impetus which we receive through our 6 sense doors, that is our eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch, and mental door, everything which arises and has impact on our sense doors is immediately, there is an automatic response of like, dislike, or indifferent. Usually it happens so quickly we're not even noticing it. Mostly things just slide through us because we have so much impetus coming, especially through the eyes, that we don't have time to register what is happening. And so some meditation techniques are for slowing everything down so that we become more conscious of what's actually happening. But anyway, normally everything which we see and hear and taste, touch, there is an immediate reaction of pain, pleasure, or neutral. And so that's how it is. That doesn't matter. But if we are not aware of that, then what happens is if it's a very strong impetus, we grasp at it. And then if it's something like something pleasurable, then we start to, feel greed comes up, grasping, desire to possess, and so forth. Or if it's something unpleasurable, then we feel irritation, annoyance, rejection, and even anger. These all start with just a little spark. But because we are unaware, it becomes larger and larger and larger until it overwhelms us. So these are the essential 3 poisons right there. Desire and aversion and this basic ignorance or delusion, which comes through our apathy about not caring one way or another. So we need to be conscious of what's going on in our mind. Not just when we're sitting in retreat, but during the day also, as much as possible, to really be aware, observe the mind. And especially during the day, in our everyday encounters, then when a negative thought comes up, to be aware of that and change it. When there is a positive thought, to encourage it. This is, he's talking about when we're in formal retreat, where we don't touch the contents of the thoughts, we just observe them. But during the day, it's very skillful. If we have a lot of irritation, annoyance, anger, to look at that and apply an antidote, such as patience, loving kindness, compassion, or just seeing it. Look, right now I am angry. Even just the awareness of negative emotions can often transform them. Normally we're not aware, and therefore we're carried away. If we are aware, then we begin to take control over our own mind. Otherwise we're slaves of our minds. Whatever is in the mind, along we go. And our mind is not a kind master. It leads us into all sorts of problems and troubles. So it makes sense, since we live in our mind, to be the one who is in control of the situation. Why should we be slaves to our own mental processes and our own emotions, swept up and down on the ocean? Now up, now down, now up, now down. We need a boat. And the boat is mindfulness. One time I was in Malaysia, and they had a t-shirt. It was a very nice t-shirt. We should really get someone to draw another one. It showed big waves. And on top of the waves, this was Malaysia, was a surfboard. And on top of the surfboard, sitting cross-legged, was a meditator. And underneath the slogan said, "Riding the waves of life, be mindful, be happy." That's a nice t-shirt. So the key to learning to understand the mind and to becoming the masters of our mind instead of the slaves is, our friend, mindfulness. Because that is what is, we just have to be more aware. What is happening not just outside, but inside. Because that's where everything transforms. Inside. If we are really conscious, if we are really mindful, then everything changes. We don't have to do anything, it changes. This Australian monk called Ajahn Brahm, he has invented a new word, kindfulness, which is beautiful. It's the combination of mindfulness and being kind. If we can just be kindful during our day, that would be an enormous step forward. And we can all try to be kindful. More conscious and present with an open heart towards all beings. Everybody can do something. It's not based on our particular beliefs. Right? I mean, just to be more aware, more present, and with a good heart, that doesn't no particular religion about that, or non-religion. It's just how to be a better human. So all of us can do that. We can all try the best we can to be kindful. And it helps to have times for formal sitting. It does help. There's no doubt. We are trying to learn a new skill, then we need to have, good guidance and definitely set apart time for practice. Recently we were in Latin America, and we were among the countries we visited was Brazil and Argentina, who are football mad. And in Argentina, they had given me a hotel room which overlooked what they saw as a nice big open space, which they thought was nice in the city, but it turned out it was a football field. So from early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight, there were teams out there, often many different teams, practicing. It was pouring with rain. It was miserable weather, cold, rain, pelting with rain. They were all out there practicing kicking a ball and falling all over the place. You lung for it and then you fall over and roll over and you're completely covered in mud. They loved it. And I thought, if they can put so much effort into something which is essentially so useless, and yet and uncomfortable, why is it that we have such resistance to a nice, simple practice like just sitting and looking at our mind? Oh, well. Anyway, okay, so can we leave it just there, I think, and we will dedicate? We can just do the short dedication. It's in Hebrew on the page 24. It's, for those of you who might not know, it is a Buddhist practice whenever there is something which is considered to be a good act, a wholesome, virtuous action, like all of you giving up your time to come here and listen to me talking. It might be considered a waste of time, but on the other hand, you did it, and there you all are, so good for you. And as a result, that is considered to be a positive action compared to what you might have been doing, at least you're sitting there. So then we dedicate the merit to all beings, not any particular group. I mean, we can think if there's anyone in trouble or suffering, especially, that we can, in our mind, especially dedicate to that person. But in general, we're dedicating it for all sentient beings, that they should be well and happy. So please recite in Hebrew, if you want, or English if you want, whatever you feel like. Okay, so somebody's leading. Thank you. So thank you all very much. Please leave the hall mindfully. Okay? Mindfully means that we are conscious of our body and the movement. The Buddha said that we should be aware when we are standing, sitting, walking, or lying down. We should know the postures, the 4 postures. We should be aware of our body as we are moving. And so please, in any situation, also try to be aware, if you can, of the mind at the same time. If you can't do both, then in the beginning, concentrate on the postures, because that's easier, right? Just when we're sitting, know we're sitting. When we're standing, we know we're standing. When we're walking, we know we're walking. When we're lying down, we know we're lying down. That's not difficult. But normally we don't do it. While we're walking, we're thinking 1,000 other things. The one thing we're not thinking about is that we're walking. While we're drinking a cup of tea or coffee, we're thinking 1,000 things. We're not thinking about the taste and the action of drinking. So it's to settle the mind back into the present moment. What is actually happening in this moment? Well, what is actually happening is you're going to stand up and you're going to walk out. So try to be aware of that, okay? Okay? Great.